Walkout that betrays our children again. We asked the question, or posed it at least in the headlines. I'll put it to the panel now, starting with you, Bob. Who is going to blink first in this dispute, the government or the unions?
I'm not going to put it in terms of such confrontational terms, because I think it's unhelpful. I think what the government needs to do...
Isn't it a reality?
What the government needs to do is bring down inflation, as Gillian said. It needs to bring down inflation for everybody. And so we can't have inflation-busting pay rises. When it comes to education and schools specifically, the facts are these. If you're an experienced teacher, the pay offer is 5%. If you are a new teacher, the pay offer is very near the level of inflation at 8.9%. There's also progression pay rises, which could help another 40% of teachers.
So they should just accept it?
Well, we need to get inflation down for everybody. We've promised to get it down, halve it this year, and after that we need to get it down further, because as Gillian says, getting inflation down makes everybody better off and it becomes less painful for everybody.
Zara?
So that's what we need to do.
Zara?
Well, I was at an NEU picket this morning and the teachers there don't want to be on strike. They want to be teaching kids, and them going on strike is a very difficult decision, but they haven't seen their pay increase. It's 13% less than it was when the Tories came into power. With increasing workloads, tension and stress, there's so much pressure on teachers and so many are choosing to leave the profession. So this is a measure of last resort, and they're having to do this because negotiations and conversations with the government haven't succeeded thus far.
Aubrey, who is going to blink first? Bob says that's confrontational, but that is the reality here. There's very little movement on either side.
Well, absolutely. The government is trying to paint this as an argument that says there can be no exceptions, that all public sector workers have to accept the independent pay review body recommendations. Now, they are, of course, picking a rather brave political fight, because there are some Conservative MPs who feel that there should have been an exception made for health workers, and that hasn't happened. Now, the progress that we've heard about doesn't seem to be happening. The government indicated there might be some wiggle room for manoeuvre on pay if there was progress on efficiency savings. But that stonewalling, again, is creating more bad blood between the unions and the government.
Is the government going to continue to resist the pressure that's being put upon them on a day of action like this?
I think it's a very different proposition to have teachers striking, because that does impact a lot of the workforce, because you have a lot of people that have to stay at home to look after their children. So I think this is one of the first strikes that will be felt very widely across the economy. It's maybe not, it's not going to be revolutionary because a lot of people work from home now. But in terms of the question of how we end up getting out of this situation, I think that looking forward to the next pay settlement seems to be a place where the government is willing to kind of show more flexibility. I think we might end up in a bit of a logjam if we continue with the kind of current stasis that's happening. I think ultimately pupils are really suffering. They've gone through a really tumultuous time. I completely accept and agree with Zara, actually, that teachers have gone through a very difficult time too. It just feels that when you look at the economic situation the government faces and the need to get rid of the backlogs in education as well as in the health system, there isn't a lot of flexibility the government can really show there.
Do you think there should be a special case for teachers?
Well, the average teacher, again, let's look at teachers and the train drivers, because Anita makes a good point. The average teacher earns just shy of £40,000. So they're actually a lot better off. The average teacher earns nearly £40,000. So they're a lot better off than a lot of the parents of the kids they teach. The average train driver earns, depending on overtime, between 60 and 100,000. And actually, at the next election, there's going to be, the politics of this, at the next election, there's going to be a simple choice, that we on the side of the workers, we want people to get to work. We're bringing in minimum service levels, which will be scrapped by the Labour Party. And the Labour Party have taken 125 million from the unions in the last 10 years. So, of course, they're going to do the unions' bidding.
Trade union donations are the cleanest money in politics, and if every Tory MP declared their second jobs, donations from oil and gas, billionaires and all sorts of other vested interests, I don't think we'd get through many debates in Parliament if they were just declaring their interests. On the point about minimum service levels, if this government truly cared about safety, you'd think they'd mention it at least once in the bill. It doesn't get mentioned even once. It gives wide-ranging powers to the Secretary of State, who will define what minimum safety levels are, which is incredibly authoritarian. And also, if this was a measure to solve the current disputes, it's not going to. It's making the situation worse. And if this government cared about minimum service levels, they should have them on non-strike days. In the NHS, there are already chronic shortages in beds, in staffing. If we look across the public sector, that is the case. In schools, there are shortages. Rather than address those fundamental issues, this is about fighting with the unions, because I guess the government doesn't like strong unions fighting for their workers and advocating for their interests.
Bob?
Sorry, Zara. I mean, we would love folks to be working, and the idea that we go around picking battles with the unions is nonsense.
This is exactly what's happening.
But we need to have minimum service levels. If it's such a draconian measure, why does France have it? Why does Germany have it?
We have stronger unions. We have some of the most restrictive
anti-union
legislation in the Western world, and this will make it even worse.
They have unions that work with governments, work with industries in a way that some of the more left-wing unions in this country simply don't want. They want to be divisive.
So, but why
they want to be.
Chaps want to meet with RMT and other unions to resolve these disputes? Why are the government
government ministers have met with unions, but actually it's the train companies responsible for striking the contracts and striking the deals. But I come back to this central point. We're on the side of the workers. You're not.
That's 125.
You've taken 125 million from the unions.
I have not personally taken 125 million
MPs, Labour MPs, constituency associations and the Labour Party have taken 125 million
and how
from
much
the union.
And how much has the Conservative Party taken from oil and gas, from billionaires, from landlords and property developers and all sorts of other damaging interests?
Your policies are paid for by the unions. That's why you are
opposing.
That's why, Zara, you're opposing the minimum strikes.
Very clean
and at the next election, you'll be saying you'll be withdrawing this bill, and we'll be saying we need to get this bill in because it's a bill like the French have, like the Germans have, to make sure there are minimum service
in common with Jacob Rees-Mogg, but even he said the bill...
But fair point. I'll give you that much.
We'll be talking to Mick Whelan, who's the General Secretary of ASLEF, the train drivers' union that has been mentioned in this discussion after Prime Minister's questions, so around 12:30.